For years, people saw only the surface, the fame, the perfection, the confidence. But behind the strong image, there was a secret fear that chased Can Yaman like a shadow. A fear so deep it nearly destroyed the man the world admired. It began long before the cameras, before the lights and the interviews. It started in silence, a small voice that whispered every time success came too close, "What if you lose it all?" That voice never left him. Even at his peak. When millions adored him, when magazine covers called him invincible, he carried a quiet panic that no one could see. He smiled through interviews, laughed at red carpets, but deep inside, he was constantly fighting the same thought: I'm not enough. In private, he'd often disappear. Friends would call and get no answer. Some thought he was busy, others said he was just resting. But the truth was darker. Ken had been caught in a spiral. The pressure to be perfect, to always be strong, to never show weakness. Fame had become a prison with golden walls. There were nights when he would stare at his reflection, barely recognizing the man in the mirror. The actor looked perfect. The human underneath looked tired, lost. They see the character, he once told a close friend. But sometimes, I forget who I am without him. That fear, of losing himself, became his silent enemy. He tried to run from it. He buried it under work, under gym sessions, under endless interviews where he played the part of the confident star. But no matter how far he ran, it followed him, into his sleep, into his thoughts, into every smile that didn't reach his eyes. One night, while filming abroad, everything collapsed. He froze in the middle of a scene. His chest tightened, his hands trembled, and for the first time, he couldn't continue. The crew thought it was exhaustion. He knew it was something deeper. It was fear, raw, suffocating fear. That night, he locked himself in his hotel room and stayed there for hours. No phone. No noise. Just silence. And in that silence, he faced the truth he had avoided for years. He wasn't afraid of failure, he was afraid of himself. Afraid of what fame had turned him into. And that realization changed everything. From the outside, everything looked perfect. The career, the body, the fame, all the pieces of a life most people could only dream of. But perfection has a cost, and for Can Yaman, that cost was his peace. It started slowly. Little moments of exhaustion he brushed off as normal. Short tempers on set that he later regretted. Nights when he couldn't sleep no matter how tired he was. Then, one day, it all came crashing down. He had been filming a scene that required intensity, anger, heartbreak, tears. But as the director called cut, Ken didn't move. His eyes were open, his breathing shallow. For a few seconds, he wasn't acting anymore, he was breaking. The crew fell silent. Some thought he was just staying in character, others thought he was being dramatic. But those who knew him well saw something different: fear. Not of the scene, not of failure, but of himself. The line between the man and the roles he played had finally disappeared. Later that night, he left the set without saying a word. He walked through the streets of a foreign city with his hood up, his phone turned off, and his thoughts louder than ever. Every step echoed the same question: who am I when the lights go out? He ended up at a small cafe, empty, quiet, forgotten by the world. The waitress didn't recognize him, and for the first time in years, that felt good. He sat there for hours, staring at his untouched coffee, trying to remember the last time he had felt free. When the tears came, they weren't loud or dramatic. They were silent. The kind that escape when you've spent too long pretending to be fine. That night, something broke inside him, but in breaking, something else began to heal. He realized that the fear wasn't just about losing fame or control. It was deeper. It was about being seen, truly seen, as a flawed, fragile man beneath the image everyone adored. He called an old friend, someone who had known him before the fame, before the chaos. "I think I've lost myself," he whispered. The voice on the other end didn't lecture or console. They simply said, "Then find the version of you that isn't afraid to be real." Those words hit him harder than any headline ever could. For the first time, Can allowed himself to stop fighting. To breathe. To admit he was human. He took a break from social media, distanced himself from the noise, and retreated into silence, not to disappear, but to rediscover. Days turned into weeks, and slowly, the panic began to fade. In its place, there was something unfamiliar: peace. Real peace. And when he looked in the mirror again, he saw not the actor, not the public image, but the man, raw, imperfect, and finally honest. There comes a point when silence becomes too heavy to carry. For Can Yaman, that point arrived one quiet morning when he realized he couldn't pretend anymore. The fear he'd been hiding for years, the one he had buried under fame, strength, and pride, was no longer silent. It was screaming. He had spent most of his career building an image of perfection, disciplined, confident, untouchable. Fans admired his intensity, his work ethic, his control. But what they didn't see was the constant pressure behind that control, the voice that whispered, "You can't fail. You can't rest. You can't be weak." That voice had kept him alive in the industry, but it was killing the man inside. For years, he told himself it was normal, the price of ambition, the cost of success. But every time he looked around, he felt more alone. Friends had drifted away. Relationships had crumbled. Even when surrounded by cameras, assistants, and fans, he felt like he was standing on an island that no one else could reach. He started to notice it in small moments. The way his hands trembled before interviews, the sleepless nights that ended with him pacing the floor, the fake smile he'd practiced so many times that it no longer felt like his. Then came the breaking point, a conversation that changed everything. It was during a late-night talk with someone he trusted deeply, someone who had seen him at his worst. "You don't have to be perfect," they said softly. "You just have to be real." He wanted to believe it, but he didn't know how. For so long, he had confused vulnerability with weakness. He had worn his strength like armor, not realizing it was suffocating him. And so, for the first time in years, he told the truth. In a quiet interview months later, Can looked straight into the camera and admitted what the world never expected to hear: "I was afraid of myself. Of not being enough. Of losing the person I became to please everyone else." The confession hit his fans like lightning. This was not the fearless star they were used to seeing. This was a man, fragile, wounded, human. But instead of judgment, something beautiful happened. The world didn't turn away. It leaned closer. Fans from across the globe sent messages of love, support, and understanding. They didn't see weakness in his words, they saw courage. And that's when Can realized something profound: the fear that had almost destroyed him was never meant to be hidden. It was meant to be faced, shared, and transformed. He wasn't ashamed anymore. He was finally free. And for the first time in years, when he smiled, it wasn't for the cameras. It was real. When you've lived in fear long enough, even peace can feel unfamiliar. For Can Yaman, the journey from panic to purpose wasn't instant, it was slow, deliberate, and painfully real. But the man who once hid behind walls of pride was learning to breathe again. He started small. He began waking up before dawn, not for work, not for cameras, but for himself. He'd walk through the quiet streets of Rome, watching the sunrise paint the sky in gold. For the first time in years, he wasn't rushing anywhere. There was no director waiting, no headlines chasing him. Just silence, and freedom. In that silence, he started to rebuild. Not the star, but the man. He surrounded himself with fewer people, but real ones, those who saw him, not his fame. He found strength not in being perfect, but in being honest. He began using his voice differently too. Instead of hiding behind press statements and polished interviews, he spoke about what truly mattered: mental health, emotional honesty, vulnerability. The same things he had once feared to admit became his message of hope. "I used to think showing weakness would destroy me," he said during a candid conversation months later. but the truth is, hiding it almost did. Those words became a turning point not just for him, but for millions who followed him. Fans who once admired his strength now respected his openness even more. Because real strength, they realized, wasn't in never falling, it was in learning how to rise again. Professionally, he found new life too. Every role he took after that carried something different, more depth, more truth. Directors noticed it. Audiences felt it. He wasn't acting anymore, he was living through his characters. Each story became a reflection of the man who had faced his own darkness and turned it into light. And through it all, the smile returned, slow, gentle, genuine. The same smile that once hid pain now radiated peace. Friends said he seemed lighter, as if the weight he had carried for years had finally lifted. He no longer feared being misunderstood or misjudged. He had accepted that not everyone would love him, not everyone would believe in him, and that was okay. Because he finally did. There was a quiet moment one evening when he stood on a balcony overlooking the city. The air was cool, the lights shimmered below, and he whispered softly to himself, "Fear didn't destroy me. It shaped me." In that single line, his entire story lived. He wasn't the man who hid from pain anymore. He wasn't the man who ran from himself. He was the man who faced his shadow and learned how to dance with it. And that's what the world saw when he finally smiled again. Not a perfect man, but a free one. The fear that once almost destroyed him had become the fire that rebuilt him.